The streets in the northern Italian town of Asolo tell a remarkable story of time and artistry. Main Street is more than 1,000 years old and so narrow, cars can only drive in one direction. Other streets in town pay homage to centuries of writers and artists who lived and worked here, including English poet Robert Browning. Asolo is a tiny hilltop town where technology is measured in terms of millennium. The fountain in the plaza is still fed by an ancient Roman aqueduct. Just outside of town is a place where artisans practice the centuries-old craft of Italian leather making. Except these days, their art is all about keeping motorcycle riders and racers safe. Historically, riding and racing motorcycles has always been dangerous. For years, what riders wore for protection was more of an afterthought than a conscious decision on how to manage the risk. As late as the 1980s, racers rarely walked away from a crash without serious injury.
My bike slid. I couldn't get my hand out in time and went down so fast, so it broke my hand right here.
Casts on both hands, big high side in qualifying, didn't even think I was going to be able to race.
Alpinestars is a company focused on managing the risk of riding a motorcycle. They specialize in top-of-the-line motorcycle riding and racing gear. Boots, gloves, back protectors, and their custom-made, handcrafted full-piece racing leathers. Alpinestars riding gear can be seen on the roads and racetracks around the world. But each piece is designed, tested, and handcrafted at their headquarters outside of Asolo. Inside the Alpinestars factory, technology is state-of-the-art, and the goal is a constant search to find new ways to protect people who ride or race motorcycles.
The ubiquitous leather jacket is long gone in these days. We have companies like Alpenstar putting together products that protect us. So if you're thinking about getting into motorcycling, if you're into motorcycling and you're wearing a black leather jacket, you've got to start thinking about companies that are putting together these products.
Alpinestars is a company whose original focus was on the trek, not the track.
Alpinestars as a company was founded in 1963, initially building ski boots and mountain hiking boots. We're only a few miles from the Alpine Dolomites here, so there's a heritage for mountain climbing and trekking. But also there's a strong motorcycle fraternity here.
On the first floor of the Alpinestars building, there's what looks like a high-fashion Italian showroom. It's open to the public. Except for helmets, you can find anything you need to protect yourself on a motorcycle. But in the basement, which is off limits to visitors, it's not fashion, but function that matters. This is where all Alpinestars riding gear is designed and tested. To reduce the risk of injury in a crash, nothing can be left to chance because even the best racers crash without warning.
5 seconds in front and I fell down with 3 laps to go. What was I thinking?
They call this the walk meter machine, where boots are put through 100,000 cycles, the equivalent of walking 35 miles. But the test is really about how the boot will perform when riding. Will it hold up to the stress and strain of sudden major impact?
Obviously, the foot is a complex piece of physiological anatomy, and it's very important to stop the force of an impact being transmitted in a very pure form straight to the joints of the foot or up to the knee.
Absorbing the force of an impact and spreading that energy out away from the body are fundamental concepts for all protective riding gear. Here, a new back protector is being tested by repeatedly dropping a 10-pound weight and measuring where the energy from the impact goes. This test will be repeated hundreds of times.
The initial impact spread is important because it prevents the actual impact energy being directed straight through the protector into the rider's body.
The back protector is really a two-part system, using a hard shell over a soft padded liner.
The profile of this protector is very thin. It also is allowed to move naturally with the rider in the right direction, but not to hyperextend in the wrong direction backwards.
The back protector uses man-made thermoplastic and gels to protect the rider. But when it comes to the actual riding suits, leather is still the material of choice. Very thick leather.
Because motorcycling is dynamic, and in the event of an accident, there's a lot of abrasion, a lot of impact, we specify 1.4 to 1.2 millimeter thickness of leather. It's considerably thicker than the average fashion garment because when the time comes, it has to go through a much more rigorous test of its properties.
The abrasion test machine runs pads of sandpaper over different leather samples in a scientifically controlled environment to make sure the leather will provide enough protection in the event of a crash. Surprisingly, the wrong color of leather dyes can reduce the leather's ability to withstand a crash.
In treating the leather with different colors, it can actually affect the performance of the leather. A simple example is the red and the silver both passed the test, while the blue and the green, in this case, failed the test.
The next key to protection is to make sure that all the seams in the leather riding suit are strong enough. For that, they use another machine that stresses each test seam until it finally fails.
So here we're seeing the actual trace for the force being submitted to the material in the machine. In the event of an accident, a rider coming off a motorcycle, a very sudden, large force is often subjected to the seam. On the monitor here, you can see the force readout that the seam and the material is being subjected to. 1,000 newtons on the scale here equates roughly to 500 pounds of force. So we're looking for that as the minimum standard that we require. So here, in this case, this sample broke above that, so we've exceeded our own in-house standards.
Over the past 5 to 10 years, such high-tech lab work has produced riding gear that has significantly reduced the number and severity of injuries to both riders and racers.